All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. I'm excited to welcome my friend and fellow archaeologist, Julie EVO, to the show today. Julie, what's going on? Thanks so much for joining me on the show, and welcome to the All Around Adventure podcast.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to catch up with you. It's been some time.
Yes, definitely. You and I first met, well, in Illinois first, but then you and I, we kind of got voluntold to head down to super hot Louisiana to slug it out down there in the briars and all the thickness. So it was an interesting way that we met. But yes, I know you kind of moved on, though, and you are now in Hawaii. It's just how you feeling being over there and settling in to the islands?
Well, I can tell you it's definitely different from Illinois and Louisiana.
Right.
But honestly, I absolutely loved it. I have visited before, and I mean, I'm initially from the DC area, but then I was raised in Florida almost my entire life. So Hawaii is just kind of like Florida, but with mountains. So it's amazing for hiking and surfing and outdoors, and just the culture here is so rich. So from that aspect, it's really fun too.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And, you know, Hawaii is actually one of 8 states that I have left to make it to all 50 states. And I feel like I want to save Alaska and Hawaii for last. But I'm wondering in which order I want to do them. Like, part of me wants to say save Alaska for last because it would be very epic, like nature wise and everything like that. But then I'm thinking, should I go slug it out in Alaska and then just go relax on the beach in Hawaii just to cap off like my 50th state? So I guess it really could go either way.
I think you should save Hawaii for last, especially since it is, in fact, the 50th state.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about it that way. So, all right then. Okay, that sounds like a plan to me. So,
honestly, I don't blame you. Going from the super cold and then nice tropical beaches, hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then of course, as you've alluded to, I could very well make Hawaii a pretty grand adventure in itself with like the mountains and the hiking and getting out into the jungles and things like that. So, it sounds to me like Hawaii has a little bit of something for everyone. I mean, obviously, I don't think I'm going to be doing like some snowboarding or skiing there anytime soon. But, you know, it's just as far as finding, you know, some epic adventure, but then just still having that chill, relaxing atmosphere just as well, too. It sounds like it has a little something to offer to everybody.
Oh, it definitely does. And I mean, you can't go snowboarding or anything like that over here, but on Big Island, like right now, everybody's talking about the huge volcano eruption, right? But actually on the other mountain across the way, there's snow. So there's literal fire and ice on one island over here.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
Okay, yeah, that there's got to be a little sciencey stuff like behind that, though. Maybe a little bit too complex for my way of thinking, like at least right now at 8 o'clock at night. But but I mean, yeah, right on. So well, anyway, we've got a little bit to cover today, and you know, as I've mentioned when I introduced you at the start of this conversation, is that you are also an archaeologist. And typically, with my guest episodes, I just like to go back to the beginning. You know, just kind of what was it that sort of sparked the initial interest and you know, inspiration, I guess I'll say, for my guests for whatever it is that they pursue. So, what has it been for you? We'll take us back a little bit here and tell us what inspired you to become an archaeologist.
Well, I would say my journey into archaeology has been really interesting, as it is with most people. For the longest time, I wanted to be, you know, a million different things as a kid. And at first, I really fell in love with Egyptology and all of that, you know, King Tut, and all of those amazing discoveries just throughout that entire culture. But then later on, you know, I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I wanted to be an attorney. All kinds of things. But one of my earliest memories as a kid, I'll always remember this. I want to say that I was in like kindergarten, sometime in elementary school. We were playing in the playground, and everybody was just like off running around on the swings or whatever. And I was underneath the slide, digging underneath it with my hands, and I got so excited. Like, oh my God, I found a shell. So I think maybe from that point, something sparked in me. And then it really wasn't until college where I took just an elective in Intro to Cultural Anthropology. And I absolutely loved it just because my family, I joke, is like the mini United Nations. We literally have people from all over, and we're very proud of that. So just getting to know that there is, in fact, a field that you can work in and you can make a career out of, that you can get to know other cultures and other peoples, that just sounded amazing. And I love being outside, so digging in the dirt didn't sound too bad.
All right, right on. Now, did you go to university in the DC area, or while you were down in Florida? Where does that kind of fall in the timeline of where you were?
Yeah, so I got both my undergrad and graduate degrees from Florida Gulf Coast University. It's essentially in a small town in Southwest Florida called Fort Myers. It's actually where the big Hurricane Ian just hit. So that in itself has been interesting, seeing that from afar. But yeah, so that's where I got those degrees, and my graduate degree is actually slightly different. It's in forensics. So typically within the archaeology field, I am quote unquote a bioarchaeologist or a biological archaeologist. And essentially all that means is that my specialty is in the examination and recovery of human remains.
Yeah. Okay. And so after college, and well, maybe this is even like during college too, where did this lead you as far as like field work is concerned? I mean, did you just mostly just operating in and around Florida at the time? Did you kind of find yourself like going to other places within the Southeast, just, yeah, early memories of field work? Where did you go?
Yeah, so thankfully with field work, I've been a little bit everywhere. I would say early on, my very first field experience was actually in El Salvador, where my mom is from.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was really great working on a Mayan site. Because I mean, hello, amazing archaeology.
Right. Yeah.
So I definitely got a little spoiled for my very first archaeology experience. Then after that, I did a lot of work in Florida, particularly because I started working in CRM in cultural resource management. So primarily focused in the Southeast region, but I've also done work with the DPAA looking for missing military personnel in Germany, which was awesome. And then really just all over the US when both of us were working at search.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, different environments, different places. I kind of, when I was in the Marine Corps, we have this saying, any climb in place, meaning that you can drop a Marine like anywhere in the world and they could operate just fine. I kind of feel like that has to sort of apply to archaeologists as well, where it's like, you're talking about going to Central America and then going all the way to Central Europe, both environments, quite different in themselves. Even here in the US, I mean, like the Midwest United States is a little bit different than that of like the Southeastern United States. And even if you get out further out west to different environment altogether. So that's one thing I like about my home country is that, we have a little bit of something for everyone here when it comes to nature for the most part. So I guess maybe we'll just dial it in and just focus on here stateside. What have been some of your favorite locations that you got to travel to here stateside to conduct field work?
Oh man, there's been so many. I mean, the majority of my experience in field work is in Florida. So thankfully working on a lot of like prehistoric Native American sites have been awesome. And especially working in the forensic field, working with like the Native American groups themselves. So like with the Seminole or the Miccosukee tribes who are absolutely amazing, helping to support them in their efforts as well, have been really great. I mean, I'm sure we both worked on Miami, even though we didn't work together at the same time, but that's an amazing site, the
Sure
Brickell site.
is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, man, I mean, I would say it's more so just like little memorable field projects. Like I always remember working in Iowa on a pipeline, and we were doing some transects through these cornfields, which are always fun, as you know.
I think you and I have different definitions of fun on that one, but carry on, carry on.
But we were trying to get two through this other parcel, and we had to cross this barbed wire fence, and it was a little high, so we ended up having to like jump for it, and some of the other crew was trying to give me a boost, and I ended up falling. So I ended up getting a scar from barbed wire on my butt, and I'll always remember it.
Oh goodness. I appreciate that we can look back. You can look back on a moment like that and laugh. I'm sure at the time it probably wasn't quite as funny. Well, then again, who knows? Maybe it was, but it is always kind of funny where it's like stories like that, moments like that may have sucked in the moment. They usually are the ones that we kind of look back on with a great deal of nostalgia and just kind of sort of laugh about. But I certainly do know what you're talking about of operating in the Midwest, and especially before harvest when the corn's like 10 feet tall or something outrageous like that. And it's like so dense where, we had to use radio contact, even though if we're only like 15 meters apart, we can't see each other, even if we're like totally clad in high vis clothing. It's just really that dense. And I cracked a joke one time during one of my safety briefings where I was actually talking about the importance of good communication and using radios. And I said, yeah, because you all don't want to get lost out there in that maze while you're up to your ears.
Oh my God.
I know, a little bit of a corny joke, I know.
No, it's a good one.
Yeah,
no,
I try.
crazy.
I try.
It's crazy that happens because, like, I've even seen that in Louisiana where you see these giant stalks and they're so much taller than you. I mean, I'm not a small woman either. Like, I'm 5'7", not too bad. But man, like, it's so terrible because you're just in this terrible heat, working your butt off, just sweating and dehydrated and just trying to get through the day, and you just want to feel a nice cool breeze, but then you see it above your head on the stalks. It doesn't actually reach you, and it's terrible.
Yeah, and one of the things that I have the most trouble with is when it's really hot and humid and I'm sweating, and of course we're trying to record all our field data on our phones, and sweat's literally dripping on my phone and activating my touchscreen and like inputting data for me. And I'm trying to actually tap it, but then my fingers and my hands are wet or dirty, so it's not, activating the touchscreen that way either. And then I'm trying to like wipe it on my shirt or my pants, and then my shirt and pants are soaked too. And so it is the worst.
No, I have been there and unfortunately done that.
All right. Well, so that's actually some of the places that you have been, but, and of course, with our job as archaeologists, when it comes to like collecting data and collecting artifacts, I mean, the artifacts themselves are great, but obviously for us, it's the context behind them more than anything. But I think when many people think of archaeology, it is the artifacts that kind of sort of come to mind. So I guess just going along with that for the sake of our audience here, I'm sure a lot of them would be curious to ask you right now is just what have been some of your coolest artifacts that you recovered along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that whenever anybody thinks about archaeology, you always think about, like finding some old village site or some pottery or some tools, different things like that. And thankfully, I've been able to see quite a few things in my archaeology career. I would say some of the coolest ones that I have found have been like some personal items and coffin hardware from cemetery sites. So that's always been really cool because you can, ironically, I think especially when it comes to cemeteries and forensics and human remains, a lot of people may not view it as a historic stamp, but it is, especially when it comes to coffin hardware. It's almost just like any other artifact in which there are style changes, material changes throughout time, and those can give you specific markers and indicators and different cultural differences among those too. So that's really fun. But then also, I always remember the first time actually in Florida, because for tool making, for example, in Florida, in prehistoric Florida, we don't have a lot of really nice quality rock quarry sites that we can build these beautiful rock or lithic tools that you can see in other areas. So running into and seeing like some heat treated coral that actually ended up being made into a tool. Like that was absolutely mind blowing to me. And just seeing how innovative people could be in the environments that they're in.
Yeah, and depending on going back to what we were talking about, depending on what part of the country that you may be in, it's just tools are going to look different. I mean, of course, those living in coastal Florida, I mean, a lot of their tools could be derived from the sea. You know, we've seen this with like shells being, filed down into like drill bits, and same thing with like shark teeth being filed down into drill bits and things along those lines, where it's like out in New Mexico, where I had my first professional stint as an archaeologist. It's all stone tools, and it's all on the surface too. Like, I mean, it wasn't uncommon for us to find sites out there and in some of those pueblos in northern New Mexico, and just find like 100 flakes just right there on the surface, and not having to do any excavation whatsoever because it's all right there. And so it just goes back to just how vast and how far back our country goes, and just how different environments can just, what did people way back when, what did they take, what did they have available to use?
Exactly. It's so interesting. And then seeing those regional differences and how they compare with one another, and how similar and how different they are, it's so cool.
All right. Right on. So now I feel like you and I, we've kind of sort of talked about how challenging being out in the field could be. And then once again, different areas will have their own unique set of challenges that we're going to be up against. But kind of just looking back on your experience thus far, and I don't know, who knows? I mean, based on what you and I talked about already, we may not have to go back very far here, but has there ever been a project that just stands out in your mind that was just the most challenging, the roughest and the toughest of the bunch, that, you kind of left there thinking, oh, thank goodness that this rotation's over with? Anything come to mind?
I mean, there's definitely been some tough projects, but I don't think there's ever really been a project that, I'm sure you've heard this phrase in a few, but like, quote unquote, broke me.
Yeah.
But I would say there are definitely places like, oh God, I never ever want to do archaeology fieldwork in Louisiana ever again in my life. It is just, it's crazy because, working a lot in Florida, you are so used to like really deep humidity, like working in the Everglades, for example, there's these giant, massive pythons everywhere. There's alligators everywhere. And it's super hot. It's humid. You're out in the middle of absolute nowhere. There's no signal. But Louisiana, for some reason, is just a million times worse. I really can't explain it, but it just really is.
Yeah, well, I like that you bring that up, as I'm actually flying out tomorrow to return to Western Louisiana, where we were before. I guess, maybe I did well enough the first time around that I got invited to go back there to continue working. So I guess I'll take that as a compliment. But yeah, it's just, Western Louisiana and Fort Polk being right there too. I mean, that's where like they would get soldiers prepared for Vietnam. So that just kind of goes to show what type of environment that is. I mean, if that's the best place they could think of here in the US that would replicate the conditions that the soldiers would have faced, heading over to Vietnam, you can tell you're in for some fun. And I put that in quotations, fun.
Yeah, sure. I think we have a different definition of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely. Well, yeah. So that's just some of the places that you got to travel to just for field work. But I mean, of course, you found yourself just around the world quite a bit, just on your own, and seeking out, your own personal adventures too. And, you were kind of cueing me in before we hit recording here that just earlier this year, you were actually in the Arctic Circle up in Norway. So, which, here we are talking about, hot and humid Louisiana. Now you're getting way up into the Arctic. So, I mean, just kind of talk to us a little bit about that contrast and just getting way up there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll say I'm a huge travel bug. So every year I try to do at least one big trip somewhere. This year I've actually been very fortunate. I've done quite a lot of traveling. But in particular, this trip that I did to the Arctic Circle really, honestly, just kind of changed my life. I'm not going to lie. I ended up doing a trip to Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. But particularly in Norway is really where I just had these moments that really made me reflect on my life. And just, I feel like ever since that, everything in my life changed and tilted. And it's just kind of ironic because the whole reason I was going to go on that trip in the first place actually was because I was going to go with my ex, and some of his family was from that region of the world, so he wanted to see where his family came from and whatnot. But then we actually ended up not working out, and we broke up beforehand, very badly. So it just turned into this really interesting situation of like, well, everything's paid for. Like, should I go? Should I not go? Is he going to be there? Is it going to be awkward? What's going to happen? But it was, the breakup itself was a lot to go through personally. And then I ended up deciding, okay, let me just go ahead and go. And my mom was really sweet enough that she decided to go with me. So it was a cute little like mother-daughter trip. But I was just really determined to do some intense hiking in the Arctic Circle, particularly in the northern region of Norway. And I mean, I've done quite a bit of hiking before. We work outside all the time, as you know. We're literally trekking just these giant lines and transects, regardless of whatever environment we're in. But it's just crazy, like seeing these different views, because I'm not used to the snow, but also the fact that I was quite literally climbing these beautiful, huge mountains that are taking hours to hike. But I felt like it was so symbolic of all of the struggles that I had been through in my life, and maybe, reflect on so much in my life. Those moments where you're climbing up and you're like, oh my God, I cannot go any further. Like, this is it. My legs are going to break, everything. But then you just find the strength within yourself and you just keep going. You keep like, I remember literally telling myself, like, just a little bit more, you can do it. You'll reach the top. And it just, once you get to the top, it was like, wow, like all of that work, all of, the pain you were feeling before, it all vanishes. It all goes away. And you're just taking in such a breathtaking view and just so thankful for the life you have. So just in awe, really, of life itself and of the world and how beautiful it can be, regardless of whatever struggles you're in. So I felt like not only did I climb these physical mountains, but I climbed spiritual and emotional mountains within myself too. So that trip will always be so memorable for me.
All right. Awesome. Nature is kind of a very interesting thing. Well, I say that nature is savage, but nature can also be healing too. Like, and I was thinking about this myself when I did my through hike across Michigan last year. I think I told you a little bit about it. I, hiked across the entire state. It was about 1,200 miles. Took me 3.5 months to do something like that. But I remember I was listening to an audiobook. It was The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, and he was talking about in the book that if an animal dies out in nature, it's going to die of one of three ways. It's either going to starve to death, or the elements are going to get it, or it's going to die through violence. Like, just that's usually one of like those ways too. So in that way, nature's kind of savage, but it's just, there's a connection there that I think many of us like long for, that we've kind of been cut away from so long. When, as you described, you're climbing these mountains, you're overcoming like the adversity along the way, and just seeing these breathtaking views just far away from, civilization, and you just got nothing but wilderness as far as the eye can see. It's healing in a way, kind of, sort of. And I've experienced that many times over myself, because, I had like physical mountains that I had to climb up to during my trek. And so it's just getting out in the wild. I mean, I think it's something primal within us. I mean, that's where we evolved. I mean, you and I are as archaeologists, we know that that's where we evolved. And so, yeah, I think it's just getting back to the basics, just getting out there.
Oh gosh, yeah, it definitely is. And that was one thing I loved about like that whole region of the world, period, like especially Norway. Um, I ended up looking it up afterwards. And there's this word that I cannot say because I do not want to butcher it. Um, but essentially, it's this like Scandinavian concept. So just the region of the world, period, Scandinavia, where you find yourself and you find peace in nature. And because of that, because it's so ingrained into the culture there, a lot of places throughout that region, you can just pull over and camp wherever. And
Mm.
if it's on private property, most of the time, like you can just go to the people and you can tell them, "Hey, can I just like camp over there? I'm just gonna climb the mountain behind your house." And they're like, "Oh yeah, go for it. Have fun. Take this trail over here." Like it's so unheard of. You can imagine it because I mean, I'll even say like even here in Hawaii, there's so much hiking to be done. And it is also a part of the culture here. Everybody does it, but there's this huge emphasis on, oh, well, it's on private property. Don't go over there. You're not allowed, all of this other things. And being able to see that difference, um, it was really cool and really interesting.
Yeah, I have noticed that about some countries in Europe as well. Like, I used to live in the UK. That's where I went to grad school, and they have this thing. I can't remember like what it's called, but essentially, it's like you are allowed to walk on like people's private property in like places like the Peak District and the Lake District. I mean, obviously, the stipulation is if you open any gates, close them up immediately, and things along those lines, and leave no trace, and so on and so forth. I mean, certainly vastly different here stateside. Like as you and I know that we've kind of run into some issues when it came to like private property in the past. So it's kind of nice, I guess, to maybe be a little bit able to free roam in some of these European countries.
Oh, definitely. But I really liked how you said, nature is savage because it definitely can be. And I think as beautiful as nature is, a lot of people, I feel like, just take it for granted. And I can honestly say that I've seen that in person, but I've seen it especially a lot more recently here in Hawaii, which has been interesting. Like I went to Maui to go visit my best friend because she lives over there for Thanksgiving. And it's the winter time here, even though it's not really winter. I mean, I'm wearing a sweater because I'm inside, but it's still nice and warm for the most part. But the winds pick up a lot more, and it actually ends up affecting the wave currents, for example. So they're a lot more intense. So here on Oahu, for example, we just had a big surf competition in which, there's like at least 15-foot waves on
Wow.
the North, and it's just going to increase and increase. But we were seeing some of those when we were in Maui, and uh, thankfully, I was there with my boyfriend. She was there with her husband, and the two of them have been lifeguards before, and we're all just enjoying our time at the beach. But some people are off trying to bodyboard into like these 15, 17-foot waves, and we're just trying to stay by the shore. And then all of a sudden, there end up being quite a few ocean rescues, and we actually end up helping with them. And it's just crazy because like for the first one, for example, it was just an older man, which is understandable. The waves were a little intense. Maybe he shouldn't have gone in. And that happens. So then we ended up pulling him out, but obviously, everybody's watching what's happening. Everybody is seeing, CPR being done. We're trying to literally bring this man back to life because he fully drowned. And we ended up getting a pulse back, but the beach was pretty much cleared. But then not even 30 minutes later, we end up having to do almost another rescue because some guy is just out there on the board on like a boogie board. Um, and he just ends up getting stuck on the rocks. He just gets slammed over and over again. And thankfully, somebody was able to throw down a rope to him to get him out. But it helped to show again, like we are always at nature's mercy. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're on vacation, if you're just living here or whatever. Like you need to be mindful and respectful. And I think that helped to put that into a lot of perspective for quite some people.
Yeah, I mean, because the way I look at nature is that nature in and of itself, like how Mother Nature, how she works everything, her systems, her balance, like everything that she does is practically just perfect. And like, and then we may build cities, we may have cool architecture, but in my opinion, humans never have, nor will they ever build anything as beautiful as nature has, like not even close. And and then but at the same time, you're absolutely right. Yes, she does need to be respected because one of my friends said this to me one time, and I guess to some degree he's kind of right, but I mean it's kind of a little bit more of a tough thing. He says, the world's trying to kill you, right? Nature's trying to kill you, so you got to make yourself hard to kill. Is what he told me. This was like before I started my trek and everything like that, because when I started hiking across Michigan, I was in the Upper Peninsula, and there was some good stretches of trail where I was hiking along Lake Superior, and beautiful scenery seeing that lake. But at the same time, that lake scared the hell out of me, let me tell you, Julie, because I've heard some pretty eerie stories about it. And one of them being, and I didn't actually like look this up to verify how true it actually is, but for some reason I wouldn't say I was entirely surprised. But apparently there was three men that went out on kind of an open boat to go fishing one day, and they never came back. They never came back to shore at all. And when they sent rescue divers out to where they thought they were to look for them, they found the boat at the bottom of the lake facing upward. Two of the men were still sitting inside the boat, and the other one was just plopped right off the side. So a lot of people are wondering, how did this boat sink where two of these men still were sitting in it? Like, how does that happen? And so I'm thinking to myself, what on earth? I mean, how in the heck does that happen? So hearing stories like that, it did kind of scare me. And then of course, the forecast on any given day could call for like a 0% chance of rain, but then you'll see like just this rain wall come off the lake, like on the drop of a dime. And so I'm at her mercy. Like that lake is just going to do whatever she wants, and we can't predict it and we can't control it. So it was eye opening and quite cool. At the same time, though, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. And I can say, like, I mean, I even just experienced it like this weekend. Actually, we were trying to do a couple hikes here on the island, and we wanted to essentially go like on some of the ridge lines. And but it's super windy. I mean, it's crazy windy, especially once you get really high in elevation. So we were just like, maybe we shouldn't do it. So we ended up going down and doing just like some valley hikes, and we ended up like finding a waterfall, which was beautiful. And then we actually ended up like having this chicken just follow us around. So we were like, oh, is there that for the day? But it ended up being a great day. So it was like, sometimes things are just meant to be, and you just have to listen.
All right, absolutely. All right, well, kind of shifting gears a little bit, and since we're kind of on the topic of like water and surfing and being in the water and all that stuff, one thing I recently learned about you is that you are in fact a certified free diving mermaid, which I have never heard of such a thing until I actually like learned this about you. So I guess give us the details, and how did you kind of find yourself doing that, and how did you end up becoming a certified free diving mermaid?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I feel like it is very Florida of me, to say the least. There is a large mermaid community here in Hawaii, so that's great. But I mean, honestly, I've always just loved the water. Like, I really have always loved swimming, free diving, scuba diving. Like, I'm also a scientific diver, even though I don't really want to get into that realm necessarily. And like being on the land for work for the most part. But still just actually, scuba diving into the reefs or looking at shipwrecks or plane wrecks, like those, like it's just absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
And even like, it's a little weird, but if I'm out on a boat or like a cruise ship, for example, and like you're just in the middle of the ocean, like there's nothing around you except just ocean, I find that like so calming and so beautiful, even though I know that specifically drives a lot of people crazy. But yeah, I've always had this deep love for water, and especially in Florida, one of the things I absolutely love about Florida is that the fact that there are so many natural water springs just all throughout the state. So a lot of times, like me and my friends, we would just go camping for the weekend at one of these sites. We would just go snorkel or go free dive. A lot of the springs that were there, you can also scuba dive quite a few of them too. And at one of them, I actually ended up getting certified as a freediving mermaid, which you could do. I know there's one through Patty. I don't know if there's one through the other, like water certification organizations like NAUI or AUS and what have you. But I don't know, like I've always loved the idea of mermaids. I still totally believe in mermaids. They exist somewhere. The ocean's way too big for there not to be even the possibility, even if it's different. But I've always just loved like the mystical idea of it. And honestly, if you've never swam with a monofin, highly recommend. It is super fast. Like you can just zoom and it is awesome.
Well, actually, when you kind of talk about the whole mystical side of things, it's just, well, when you think about our oceans and just how vast like they really are, I mean, if you look at the Pacific Ocean alone, you can fit every single continent on the surface of that ocean and you would still have room to spare. And not to mention how deep that ocean goes as well is just. And we've mapped the surface of the moon better than we've mapped the surface or our ocean floors. So it's a frontier, really. It's an unexplored, uncharted frontier for the most part. So, and then, when I look back and I hear like maritime stories about like, sailors seeing like monsters in the ocean and, you hear stories about like the Kraken and Leviathan and stuff like that though, too. It's just, I mean, you just really never know. I mean, what could be out there. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool.
I mean, it's huge. It's absolutely huge, but I love it. Like, especially when, like, I'm one of those weird people and I also love like cave and cavern diving too. And one of the reasons why I love it so much is because you're literally just in the dark and you're just discovering your view and essentially your miniature version of the world underwater with a flashlight. And it's the closest thing to experiencing space, I feel like. So it's so interesting and such a cool experience. Definitely scary at times though, but I mean, hey, you got to be a little scared to enjoy life.
Yeah, I mean, well, that is the essence of adventure. I mean, the taking risk is literally ingrained in the definition for an adventure. So, I mean, you got to push the threshold a little bit,
Oh, yeah. Got to make sure your heart's pumping,
Definitely. Calculated risk, though. Calculated risk. So, all right. But so as a certified free diving mermaid, I mean, is this kind of what I see, every now and then if I have been to like aquariums in the past where you actually have like women as mermaids, like in the water tanks, like amongst the fish. Is that kind of what you do? I mean, I guess where do you utilize this certification, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I basically just did it for fun, just because I wanted to be able to say like, oh, I'm a legitimate mermaid, not just one fun. But yeah, so I know quite a few people who will do that. They'll do some of like mermaid activities. I guess you could say like the mermaid professional service. So some people will do it for like parties, or they'll do it for aquariums or for like different parks. Like I know Weeki Wachee State Park in Florida, they have they have a whole mermaid show that they do and whatnot. So I think it's really fun. It's a little different.
All right, that is really cool. And yeah, when I got certified as a scuba diver, I went through NAUI, and I certainly don't remember certified freediving mermaid as part of like the curriculum or their like certification list. So maybe I'll have to look at Patty for that, I'm guessing. So maybe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's through Patty. And I actually ended up doing it. Well, it's a pretty recent thing because whole mermaid, I would say, like, I guess quote unquote culture. I don't really know how to call it, but just like mermaids kind of became like popular recently. So then it's primarily spearheaded by, at least in Florida, the one I did, by this one girl. Um, you can look up on Instagram. It's I think her name's like Vero Beach Mermaid or whatnot. But essentially, like she is a professional mermaid in every right. Like she does commercials. She like quit her job. All she does is just be a full-time mermaid, and she is living her best life. And I'm incredibly jealous. But
Wow.
yeah, that's just it's kind of cool seeing what people can do when they pursue their passions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, lots of opportunities there. I mean, it's just how many, I wonder how many people are listening to this podcast and probably didn't even realize that, yeah, you can actually go be a professional mermaid if you want to. So, I mean, so if that's available, what else is available? I mean, chase down your dreams, people, for sure.
Sky's the limit.
Right on. All right. So, kind of getting back to, yes, well, and going along with the lines of you enjoying water. I mean, of course, in Hawaii, you're in a very, very good place for it. So, I mean, since you've made that move, I mean, we're talking like towards like a few months ago. So maybe towards like early summertime, you found your way over there. So, was it just been like living and working there? I mean, have you been able to get around through much of the state to do field work yet, or is that kind of just starting to take off? I mean, what's that been looking like so far?
Yeah, so I will say moving to Hawaii is not for the faint of heart. It is a lot of work. And it is very expensive here, so that is an adjustment for sure. Um, and it's also kind of interesting too because I ended up having to move into the city. So the specific island I'm on is on Oahu, and I live in Honolulu. And in Honolulu, I live basically near Waikiki. So I am in essentially the New York of Hawaii, which is crazy in itself. And I'm not a city person, so it's been very interesting to adjust to say the very least, because it's still Hawaii, so it's still very much, live with aloha. But it's also like, hey, this is the hustle bustle of the city. You need to move. So that in itself has been interesting. But work has been awesome, actually. I can say that I am currently working for the best CRM company I've ever worked for, or at least the environment. Like, I really love my team. We're a smaller firm, we're not as big as a company you and I used to work for, but I actually kind of like that. I like that it's smaller. I like that, it truly does feel like a family environment. Like a bunch of the crew got all together and they spent Thanksgiving together. We'll probably do something similar for Christmas. We all know each other. We see each other's families and everything. Um, but professionally, what I really love specifically about working in Hawaii compared to anywhere else is just the emphasis on the community involvement aspect. Whereas I feel like working, especially in archaeology on the continent, you work on these prehistoric sites, or sometimes you even work on more modern sites, like African American cemeteries or whatever. And it's difficult to get in contact with these descendant communities. And that's a whole process that you have to go through in of in itself. And it can be quite cumbersome, but whereas here it's the exact opposite. And, sometimes over there you struggle to find even one lineal descendant, whereas here there's probably like 50.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy, but at the same time it's really interesting. So like I was working on this really big site here in Hawaii, and it was just really amazing being able to learn the history of the area from an actual person and not from a textbook, for example, where you have to, because in archaeology, whenever we do projects, we have to do all this background research, which is pretty much for the most part just reading a bunch of books, reading a bunch of articles, looking at old maps and all of that. But there's something entirely different to be able to get all of that information that you can verify or learn differences in the story from an actual individual who lived it. So just getting so close and having that more personal relationship with some of the native Hawaiian communities that are here and the individuals, like that to me is priceless. And I absolutely love it to work in.
All right, outstanding. Now, are you finding yourself on phase three projects more than anything right there? Or are you doing like some phase ones? I mean, what is that looking like project wise?
Yeah, so that's another thing that definitely was very interesting to learn. So here we don't really talk in phase one, two, or three.
Mm,
Um, we are more like the laws here, particularly when it comes to archaeology, are very specific. So here it's actually even down to like the report, what sections of the report should be in the report, what items should be in what sections of the report. Like it is interesting to say the least compared and very, very different compared to doing archaeology on the continent. So here, for the most part, it's a lot of monitoring projects, for example, just because, we're on islands. We have only so much landmass.
right.
And people have been using it for quite some time. So a lot of it is being in that middle ground of trying to protect any archaeological, culturally, historically significant area or site while still trying to mitigate the needs of development, especially, for example, here on Oahu, where it is the most developed island. So we do a lot of monitoring projects, but we also do like data recovery is what we call phase threes. So it's typically where you're going to do a big scale excavation. And thankfully, but also interestingly, there are a lot of burials, for example, that are encountered. Again, not a lot of landmass. You're stuck in the one place, so you're bound to into wherever people have buried their ancestors. So that in itself is really interesting, and seeing like those specific archaeological differences is really cool.
Gotcha. All right. Well, sounds like you're gonna have lots of cool adventures to be had there as you go about working there. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you discover along the way. So right on. Now, another thing I wanted to ask you, and I think this is going to be a stable question for any future archaeologists that I bring on my podcast, and you're going to ask these as well. And how do you feel about archaeology in the realms of pop culture? I mean, I just saw the trailer for the fifth Indiana Jones film that's coming out next year, and then of course, like there's video game franchises out there like Uncharted and Tomb Raider and stuff like that. So, which don't give the most accurate depiction of what real archaeology actually is. So I guess I was just curious to get your take on it. Like, how do you feel about archaeology and pop culture?
Oh man, that's a fun discussion in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is I don't know if you've seen the Netflix show Ancient Apocalypse and
Not,
how,
I've heard of it, but I have not watched it yet.
yeah, like it's so interesting seeing how archaeology is viewed within pop culture. I think people think about archaeology in the way that it's advertised. It's the quote unquote sexy archaeology.
Mm,
It's the huge sites that have a million artifacts, and they have, all of these beautifully preserved areas, and like you and me know, whenever you're working in the field professionally, finding like those really pretty quote unquote phase threes or data recoveries here is one in a million. 9 out of 10 times you are working out in the middle of absolute nowhere. You are miserable and you are just trying to trek through your transect and hope that you can get through the day. And if you find a tiny little itty bitty fragment of non-diagnostic glass, that's your artifact and you are very proud of it.
right.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not like beautiful urns, this whatever you want to say, like a Roman or Greek urn, or a beautiful plate or a mosaic or whatever have you. So I think it's just interesting that in pop culture, that's how it's viewed. But I feel like at the same time, it's not the popular culture's fault,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously they're going to try to break anything down and they're going to try to sell it, and can you imagine what like a TV show would be like if it just followed us around doing phase one surveys and cornfields and soy? fields and, just complete plain, like cow pastures. Like it wouldn't be very exciting, I would say, other than maybe our fun little dramas that we have, or like our little random tidbits that we come up with to entertain ourselves. Um,
Or the times we
so,
we rage out in the field too because we're so hot and sweaty and stuff.
oh
So
yeah, just us going through briars and you just use every curse word in the book. And it just, it happens. It gets you through the day. But so I understand that aspect of it, but I do think it is a little unfortunate because it does give some people the wrong idea about what we do, and I can definitely say that that is a lot more exacerbated in forensics, for example. Like a lot of people, whenever they ask, like, oh, what did you study? Like, what do you do? I'm going to say, oh, have you seen the TV show Bones? That's pretty much what I do. And although, Bones did a really great job, and Indiana Jones, and like Tomb Raider and all that stuff, did a great job of introducing the world to archaeology and making it fun, making it exciting. It also obviously isn't the true picture. So I think people should try to take it with a grain of salt and try to, we are still in the field of research. So just being a good researcher, period. If you are really interested in something, look it up, try to find whatever reading you can. But then at the same time, there's also like ancient apocalypse that says that there's, big archaeology that we're just purposefully hiding things from the public and all of that. So that there's no excuse for. That I don't understand.
Well, right. I mean, at the end of the day, we just got to keep in mind that these are works of fiction. I mean, they're for entertainment purposes only. They're not for informational purposes by any means. I mean, because it's obviously not like when we're out in the field, we're not having a battle with some sort of like opposing force of evil that wants what we're looking for their own nefarious purposes or anything like that. So we typically don't have to fight anyone while we're out in the field. And then another archaeologist that I asked this question, he kind of talked about he used the term fetishization. It's probably not the right word, where how they fetishize like a single artifact, like the Ark of the Covenant, like the Holy Grail and stuff like that, where we're trying to find just this one singular special artifact and pretty much ignoring everything else. And no, whatever we find is getting recorded and, data logged and everything like that. And then also, we're not blowing stuff up. Like, I mean, at the end of every single Indiana Jones film, every Uncharted game, whatever the lost city or location they go to, it always gets blown up in the end. So, or collapses into the sand or into the jungle or whatever. And so, no, we're not collapsing lost cities or anything like that either.
Oh, God, no, it's so funny seeing those things. It makes you laugh. Like, I remember, actually, it was on rotation when a bunch of us so essentially I was working and a bunch of the archaeological crew went to go see the movie, Uncharted. Mm-hmm. So I went to go see it too. And what was funny is that we actually had some maritime archaeologists with us. So they were like, oh God, that's not how you treat a boat. There's no way that would lift that way. This is so wrong. And they were just so frustrated. But, at the end of the day, you gotta enjoy it for what it is and try not to think too hard about it. Life it's too short. You can't get hung up in the details all the time.
Yeah, I actually went and saw the Uncharted movie with my brother. My brother's an engineer. And the whole scene where they're rigging the boats with the cargo nets and doing it under, he says, yeah, there's no way they would have pulled that off in a couple hours. That was at least like a 3-week project right there to get those ships hooked up and everything like that so they don't collapse under themselves. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you waited to say that till after the movie, that's one thing I try to do. Cause I mean, like I enjoyed the Uncharted movie. I thought it was fun. I mean, obviously you could look at it and just say, yeah, that's not how physics with a lot of the scenes really works or anything like that. But it was just a fun film. I mean, you just got to look at it that way and not, take it too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's, how you should view life. Don't take, obviously life is very important, but don't take yourself or life too seriously. You got to laugh every once in a while.
Yes, definitely. For sure. All right. So speaking of life, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, especially when you were talking about your adventures in Norway, but just kind of looking back on your own travels, looking back on your own fieldwork experiences, again, some of them have been really challenging, and there's a lot that you've learned in the realms of what you do as an archaeologist, but it's just life in general and life lessons from what have you picked up along the way just from a lot of your fieldwork experiences and just other travel experiences? Loaded question, I know, but what comes to mind?
No, I think it's a great question. I think, oh man, a couple of things come to mind, but I would say the biggest thing is that life is truly what you make of it. For some people, you have to have absolutely, the newest phone, the newest car, the nicest apartment, what have you, and that's what makes you happy. For other people, it's literally being a bum and just living in your car and just traveling to wherever that makes you happy. And I think at the end of the day, you should just be happy. Whatever that definition is for you, as long as you're not causing any harm to anybody or anything, just do it. We're here for such a short amount of time, and we should just enjoy as much of it as we can. Hug the people that you love just a little extra. Go out of your way to be a little nice, because you never know what anybody's going through. And sometimes that one random compliment actually makes their entire day. And I could say honestly, like, especially within archaeology, a lot of life is what you make of it. So when you're doing such intense, laborious, hard work out in the sun and you are just utterly miserable and you're sitting there, you're like, God, why did I decide to do this? Why is this my life? You should take that moment in and really think about it and try to answer it. Whenever you run into those moments where you're really down and you're truly questioning everything, try to find your answer. And I think for me, that especially happened when I was hiking in the Arctic Circle. I was the one who chose to go up these mountains. I was the one who chose to be over here when I could be on a tropical beach enjoying, some margaritas. But instead, I decided to put a backpack on, put on my speaker, and charge up these mountains and try to get to the top 4 hours later. So I think a lot of it is just whenever you come into those moments, you should really try to answer those tough questions that come to mind. It's like, oh man, this really hurts. Why am I doing this? Well, why are you doing this? Are you doing it because you want to? Are you doing it because you feel like you somehow deserve this? Or are you doing this because you enjoy it? Try to find those answers within yourself. And I think you will find a much deeper understanding of who you are and what motivates you. And I think that in itself will help you figure out what makes you happy, what drives you, and that should be the guide to your life, not what anybody tells you to or what anyone expects of you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that point, and it's interesting that you bring it up because gosh, what podcast was I listening to? But yeah, it was last week. I was listening to a podcast, and why I can't I think of it? But anyway, the point that was brought up was that the host posed this question, like, who's writing your story? Are you writing your story? Is your parents writing your story? Is like your peers writing your story? Is society writing your story? Is the government writing your story? It's like, who's writing your story? And so it says, if it's not you, then you got to retain control and start writing your own story. Because I mean, it's just, if other people write your story for you, it's probably not going to turn out in a way that's going to make you happy and fulfilled. So it's just, but yeah. So anyway, I appreciate that point, Julie, because it's something I kind of been thinking about, this past week as well. So right on.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I feel like that was the biggest takeaway from my trip that I did. And like I said, it changed my entire outlook. Like after that, I decided to go after the things that truly make me happy, because why not? There's no one is stopping you. And you can think that you are if you're in a terrible situation, get out of it. It's that simple. And we try to make things so complicated. And, like for me, moving out here to Hawaii, for example, was a lot because it was the first time that I was going to really move very far from my family. And my family is extremely close knit. And it was really hard for me to even think about leaving them, let alone actually coming out into the middle of the ocean where it's super expensive and far for me to ever see them again. But I knew at the end of the day that this is where I wanted to be. And that I asked myself, if my family wasn't a factor, where would I be? What would I be doing? And as hard as it was for a personal decision and a financial decision, and pretty much in any decision you can think of, I ended up going for it. And I can say that I'm genuinely the happiest that I've ever been in my life. Ever. And it's because every day I choose to be happy. And I think that in itself is very powerful and scary because, there's some days where, things are really expensive here. And I'm like, oh man, do I really want to go eat out or should I just go get groceries? Because that's what I should probably do. But then at the end of the day, it's like, fuck it. Why not? Let me just have that slice of butter cake because it makes me feel good. So I think it very much is so, you should enjoy your life. And if not for anybody else, do it for yourself and do it so you can show other people that you deserve to be happy. And then eventually you'll believe it too.
All right. Outstanding. Right on. So kind of going along with that, as we get into our wrap up, I asked all my guests towards the end of the show to issue a challenge to our listeners because, we've got to hear some cool stories from you. And we also got to get some of your insights on archaeology and a few other things. But at the end of the day, information can only take us so far. We have to follow things up with action to go out and do amazing things in our lives. So with that, what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
I love that, honestly. I would say to do something that you find scary at least once in your life. Do something that is completely outside of your character at least once. Mm-hmm. And just see where it leads you. Because you never know. I can say that I've always wanted to live in Hawaii, but a big part of me was like, you're never going to live in Hawaii. Who are you kidding? But it was scary and I did it. And honestly, it wasn't that bad in the long run. And I'm happy as a clam. So just do something scary. It won't bite you in the butt, I promise.
Right. Well, I'm pretty sure everyone listening, yes, you, the person listening that's tuning into this right now, there is something that they probably wanted to do that they've just been afraid to do. And it could be for a variety of reasons. This could be asking that person on a date because you're afraid of rejection, or going up to your boss and asking for that promotion that you think you deserve because you've been working really hard and you want to get the promotion, but you're worried about rejection or maybe imposter syndrome. So everyone's got something that they've been always wanted to do, but they've just probably been held back by fear. So I like that. I think that's a good challenge moving forward for sure.
Hell yeah. And I can say that if you're scared of asking the person that you really like out on a date, just go for it because I did that and life has been great. So just do it.
Well, there you go. You heard it, everyone. So just go do it. All right. What I have next for you, Julie, is my final three. These are three fun questions. At least I like to think that they're fun questions that all my guests get asked at the end of the show. So, of course, you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of those three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Oh, God, I hate this question. Oh, because I feel like so many different places are just so special in their own right. I would say probably my favorite place right now has to be where I was in the Arctic Circle. So I was specifically in the Lofoten Islands in northern Norway. It is absolutely beautiful. Not only is it covered in snow, but at other times it's actually known as like the archipelago of the Arctic Circle. So it can be known as like the Miami of The
Really?
Arctic, yeah, it's really interesting, like geologically speaking, because it can actually get very warm when literally the rest of the Arctic Circle is completely covered in snow and in ice, and hail. So like the time that I went in summer and it was just beautiful. Like there's still a good amount of snow, but it wasn't super cold and it wasn't really rainy. Like it was just utterly beautiful. The waters are like crystal clear. I was able to go surfing in the Arctic Circle. Like it was great. That's probably my favorite place right now.
Okay. All right. And I think that's a first to come up on the podcast where I'm not even sure if anyone mentioned like Norway in general or Scandinavia in general, maybe, but I can't think of that offhand though, if anyone else has. So I think this is a first. So right on. All right. Next question for you. What is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Ooh. Hmm. I mean, there's a good amount, but the first thing that came to mind was cliff jumping. I don't know why, but that was the first thing that came to mind. I will get to it at some point in my life.
Is there places to do that in Hawaii? I'm sure there is, right?
There is and there isn't because a lot of the valleys aren't super high here. So yes, there are
Mm,
mountains. But like here on Oahu, for example, a lot of the mountain ranges aren't that high compared to like, Maui, for example, where their big mountain Haleakala is like 10,000 feet. So it I know over there they do like a lot of hang gliding and that type of stuff.
mm. Okay. Gotcha. All right, then. So that might be another first too. I'm not sure if that's come up yet.
I don't
I
know
don't
why
think so.
that was the first thing that came to mind.
Okay. All right. Very, very cool. All right. And the last of these three questions, and this is a two-parter. What is your
Hmm.
favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
Oh, ooh, that depends. Sea or land. So my favorite sea animal is a turtle. Uh, just a green sea turtle. And thankfully, I am in the land of sea turtles here in Hawaii. So here they're called hanu, and I see them literally all the time. And life is great because of it. And fun fact, if you ever, so you're not supposed to touch any of the hanu, obviously, because they're very protected, very sacred. But if you are ever approached by one, just kind of randomly, and you're not really looking for it, it's supposed to be a sign of good luck and longevity. So,
Hmm. Okay.
but
All right.
then, yeah, but then for a land animal, my favorite is a red panda, which is a little different. I honestly like I love red pandas just because like they're so playful, but they can also be extremely vicious. Um, but they're also just complete and utter klutzes. So like you see them falling over all of the time, and it's really funny. And I've never seen one in real life, so I hope I get to one day.
Okay. Well, actually, we have had sea turtles come up as a favorite to this question once before, but not red pandas. So red pandas would be, in fact, a first. So, all right. So yeah. So pretty much just about 3 for 3 for new answers to these questions, Julie. So I like it. Right on. All right. Well, Julie, that's it. That's all the questions that I have for you today. But I guess before we wrap it up here, I mean, I guess like if our listeners wanted to connect with you, I mean, how would they go about do that? I know you're kind of out there in like the internet space and social media space a little bit. So yeah, where can we follow along?
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So you can connect with me literally anywhere. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm at Jules Evo. Facebook, just Julie Evo. LinkedIn, I think, is also just Julie Evo. So if you can't find me, I'm sure you can just message Josh.
Yes. Well, I will also get all those linked up to the show notes for this episode, so the listeners can certainly go and find them there. All right. Well, Julie, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me on the show today. You know, I'm really glad you and I were able to catch up and connect just now, and I'm glad things have been going very well for you over in Hawaii. So, and I will say it's definitely nice to know someone over there in the state in that state because with how crazy and expensive that state sounds, yeah, it definitely is nice to know someone over there for sure. So, but yeah, just thanks a lot for being here and sharing your insights with myself and listeners. You know, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This was tons of fun and being able to catch up because we haven't seen each other in a while. And yeah, if you ever find yourself over in the islands, let me know. I'll happily be your tour guide and I have a couch if you need it.
All right, right on.